you won't ask us for your bar line, to be used. I said, thank you very much, sir. So he took me back to my seat in the newsroom and settled me down, giving me words of encouragement. At least I knew that, yeah, they were impressed by my work. And then that thing went into my head, the good story. What will be the good story? What will be that good story? That good story came, one morning when I was not actually going to my beat at the court. And I was having a line in, in bed, that morning when I had a big explosion, in the area where we lived in the Odwano Mo plantation area, of Ibadan. And I was wondering what happened. As a young man, you can easily get out, and run. I came out of the house and I saw people running towards a particular direction. By the time we got to the place, where the incident happened, it was a balcony that fell. There was a naming ceremony going on below the balcony. And there were people also on the balcony following the naming ceremony, below the balcony. So the balcony fell on those people, including the baby, and the people on the balcony fell with the balcony itself on those who are under the balcony. As a newspaper reporter, the question that will first of all get into your mind is, what about the baby? Where is the baby? And I was told that they've just rushed them to the University Teaching Hospital in Ibadan with those people who were, injured. So I just went back home, put on my jeans and, my shirt, and jumped into the vehicle outside the taxi. I just took a taxi straight to the UCH in Ibadan. It's a very big hospital, as you know, in Ibadan. And to quickly get to know what was going on the day, they used to have a PR guy there that we all, used to go to. And then I went there and I asked him, have you heard about this incident in Udwana? And he confirmed that, yes, it was just reported. So what about the baby? He said, unfortunately, the baby died, and several people were injured. I thought that was a good story, although a bad, tragic, incident. So I went back, I got all the information. I went back into the newsroom. I told the news editor what has just happened. Then they assigned me a top photographer. He's an old man, actually, Mr. Adesoye, who followed me all the way down to where the incident happened and took, pictures. I went back to the UCH to do more investigation. So I came back to the newsroom, did the story. By the time my story was, finished, the pictures were ready, and we submitted to the news editor. When the editors went for the afternoon editorial meeting to decide the stories for, the next morning's newspaper, by the time Mr. Famojuro, the news editor, came back to the newsroom, I saw a broad smile, in his face, looking towards my the direction, and I just heard him congratulating me that my story will be the front page lead story, in the sketch. The following morning, I was so delighted, about that. And I think that story was a lead story of July 7, 1977. That was my first lead story in any newspaper, So I got it and I got my first bar line, A very good picture that was taken, and ironic as well, because the plan was that there will be a ceremony, after the naming ceremony, and they had ram tied, on the ropes that survived. I think the headline was like disaster at naming ceremony. 7-day-old baby dies, but the ram for festivity survives. Something like that, So that was I hit it, and then I made a promise to myself that from that day on, my stories will not go into the inside pages of the Daily Sketch. My stories will always be the front page story or the back page lead story. At the worst day, it will go to page 3, which in those days was the third most important page, in the newspaper. And I did that consistently. In some days, I will have the front page story, front page lead story, back page lead story, and page 3 lead story in some day, just in one day edition, like that. So I became a star reporter, in the Sketch. I was now, being given more important responsibilities, like covering the Federal Court of Appeal, when they won for the Western region, the old Western region zone was established in Ibadan. It was Justice Ibekwe, who was the president of that court situated in Ibadan. Today's Edo and Delta states were part, of today's, Southwest, that was under that particular Federal Court of, Appeal. So I covered one sensational story, there, only by happenstance, because editors were the ones covering that particular case. So the editor in the Sketch that was covering it couldn't make it one day, and they sent me there. So I was sitting amongst the editors, covering that story. It was a prominent chief in Ibadan, Shodende, who had been sentenced to 18 months, I think, in prison by Justice Aguda, who was the chief judge of Western State, at that time. But it was quite interesting that on the day that Chief, what's his name now, that I just, mentioned, was sentenced, to Shudende. Chief Shudende was sentenced, yes. Justice Aguda had been appointed as the new chief judge of the newly created Ondo State. You see, so in the appeal, and Chief Shudende had a very prominent lawyer, from Lagos, in the late Chief Kende Shofola, SAN, and Chief Shofola, came, with the arguments that Justice Aguda had no jurisdiction, over that case in Ibadan, since he was no longer the chief judge, of Western State. On the day he sentenced Chief Shodende, he had been appointed, as the chief judge of Ondo State. So you cannot sit in two jurisdictions at the same, time. And the judges had to be convinced that that was true. And then there was a sensational argument going on back and forth. Shofola said that the appeal court should bring Justice Aguda to court to present his letter of appointment. And, the judges found that to be ludicrous. I mean, how can you bring a whole Chief Justice, Aguda, to come to the court to present his letter of appointment? And they asked Lawyer Shofola that okay, if he was too busy because of his job and he couldn't come, what's going to happen? So, well, his secretary, can come and represent him. That day, I thought that the biggest story out of the court, was that Aguda should appear, but my senior editors didn't get it. So, and that was the story that I did for the sketch, on that day, that the appeal court, when they decided with Shofola that Aguda should appear, that was the story I took to the sketch. And then, of course, the news editor, Piero Famoduro, agreed with me that a whole Justice Aguda to appear. I said, well, yes, that's the story. So in the next morning of the daily sketch, another bank, headline, Aguda, to appear. All the other newspapers, didn't get that angle, which I got. And going back to the court that following morning and seeing all the vendors carrying the daily sketch and with my story, on the front page, that Aguda, to appear, made me very proud, as a newspaper reporter. The judges, 3 of them, saw the story before they came to the bench to sit that morning. And the first thing they did, was to call out the reporter for the daily sketch. I was surprised. I thought I had committed, an offense, there. But when they saw me and I got up, they saw that actually I was a young boy. that disarmed them. Well, they drew attention to the story of the day in the sketch, and they just want me. It's like giving me a slap in the wrist. That look, I mean, yes, this is an important and sensational, and sensitive case, but we don't want you guys to sensationalize, it. I think when I started breaking good stories like that, the sketch had confidence in me, and I was covering University of Ibadan as well. We already had an international conference centers, and some key conferences took place there. There was a particular one that the federal government did there, and the outcome of that led to the establishment of what I think we now know as the Federal Ministry of Labor. Labor and something, today. And those who organized it saw my report in the sketch and actually came to look for me, to let me know that they came to appreciate me, that every morning my report was always coming out. And with due respect to them, they pointed out some of my senior colleagues that they knew over the years, who also came in to cover that conference, but their stories never came out in their newspapers in the morning. And they saw me as a young man and said, look, what's your plan? What are you doing? I said, well, I only just started this job, and I was hoping that one day, maybe I will get a scholarship to go to NIJ or to go to Ghana Institute of Journalism, or maybe to go to London at the College of Journalism. They said that is exactly what your goal should be. Don't behave like those other guys. Yes, thank you very much, sir. And then I was sent to Benin, to be an acting state correspondent in the Bendel State. It was at that time. Emmanuel Oyenjena was our correspondent there. He was going on his annual leave. So they sent me from Ibadan to go and take over from him for the duration of his vacation. It was while I was there in Benin that the letter came from the headquarters in Ibadan, you know, giving me a scholarship to proceed to College of Journalism, you know, in London for further training. And that was how I left Nigeria to come to London. It was while I was on the course that another letter came and made me the London correspondent for the sketch to take over from Olu, what is his name? I remember Akiyeye, yeah, Olu Akiyeye. You see, there was Olu Akirele as well. You will know him with the Olu Akirele was a very good sports reporter in the sketch, you know, at that time. Very close friend of mine. So that was my, you know, the beginning of my journey as a foreign correspondent.